Hi, George here, and you are about to listen to the interview I recorded last year together with Timm Kröger about his movie The Universal Theory. This is a bonus episode to the Medicinema appointment number 23, where Devin and I discussed this film together with the Orson Welles classic The Trial in spoiler discussions. There's also a little giveaway that you can participate in for free custom Medicinema promo cards that Timm Kröger signed. You can find links for all of that in the description. And now, enjoy the super nervous George of the past conduct his very first interview. I'm here with Timm Kröger, the director of Universal Theory. My very first question would be about the internationality of this movie. I was wondering if there were ever any concerns or problems regarding communication on the set, and if so, did they add to the mysteriousness of this movie?
I mean, we were a German language team, pretty much. I guess this is a very German film in some ways, because it deals with, German past and certain psychologies of very German characters, but in a sense it's also not very German. It's not typical of German, this film, I suppose. But we still made it in Germany. We shot most of it in Austria, and it's taking place in the German language part of Switzerland, obviously. And most of our team was German speaking. There is Olivia Ross. She's playing the female lead, and she's British, French, Canadian. So she brings in a lot of internationality, more so than the Swiss setting. And her character was always supposed to speak French. So that means most interaction with her character in the film is in the French language, even though I don't really speak French. I don't, but we could talk in English. And we very much made it, I think, for an international audience. I think it works quite well for our domestic market in Germany. The numbers are quite pleasing so far, but it was certainly made with world cinema audience in mind.
After the Austria premiere, you mentioned that the whole story started off with the title, that you set yourself this impossible task of the universal theory first. So when did the Nazi angle come into play with any of this? And was it inspired to a part by the fact that there are so many crazy conspiracy theories surrounding the whole where the Nazis went, Dark Side on the Moon or something like that?
Oh, yeah, I didn't really want to go to the Dark Side of the Moon, but let me start over. I guess, the film is based on a kind of literary setting that you could see in Magic Mountain as well. Obviously, there's a Swiss hotel, and there's a sort of intellectual competition happening. That was something that always interested me, and very much in Magic Mountain, it is the case that there's a melting pot of, philosophical ideas that somehow, invariably, lead to the First World War in that novel. And so in our setting, I felt that necessarily we would have to have in mind the history of our characters, because some of these characters obviously lived in Nazi Germany and prospered there. So that was something that had to be there, not necessarily on the surface all the time, but it belongs to the past of some of our characters. So that was always important. And I guess also making a historical film, this was not put in there, to heighten our chances to win an Academy Award, because there's kind of a saying that goes, a German film can only win if there's Nazis in there. That was not entirely not the reason, I think, but the specific characters that we wanted to concern ourselves with.
Amazing. In another interview, you mentioned that the spark of the title idea came to you randomly on a train, which to me very much sounded like the explanation given by the protagonist to Bloomberg about how he came up with his thesis first. Was that a certain thought you had, a connection?
But I didn't really come up with a title. The title occurred to me as a good film title. Obviously, it's a long-standing concept in physics, a theory of everything, a grand unified theory, a universal theory. You obviously know there's another film called The Theory of Everything. The German title is Die Theorie von allem, which would literally be the theory of everything. But for many reasons, we didn't want to use that anymore anyway. Anyway, I had that title in mind in German, I have to say, and I saw black and white Swiss hotel and skiing physicists, and I didn't really know much about the story. I just knew there was a sort of Hitchcock meets Lynch potential there, and that was an idea I just clinged onto, and it was very much with the help of my screenwriter Roderick that we managed to make a coherent story out of it.
I would say so. To me, one of the core ideas of this movie is this questioning of fate and how we maybe just believe in that concept to live better with the decisions we've made along the way. Are there any creative decisions you made during the making of this film that you would hope that in a different parallel universe you would have decided differently?
Oh, there's always room to improve, and obviously, you learn so much only when you're actually making a film. Like, you can think about a film all the time, and that actually helps you make the film in a better way. Like, very much in this film, we had to prepare a lot because we only had 30 shooting days. So every film I watched was kind of in preparation for this film. Like, how is this scene gonna work? Where do I put the camera? Where do I put the actors? How do they interact? So there's lots of ways to improve. Like now that I've finished the film, I wish it were 5 minutes shorter. I wish I could have done a lot of things differently. But films are a document of our ability based on that time, what we were able to do in that moment in time, I suppose. And no, I guess spiritually and artistically, I'm quite pleased with the result. I think the film is quite special and very close and personal to me in the sense that it takes things very, very seriously, but also very much not at the same time. And I think there's a special quality to the film that we don't see all too often, especially in German cinema. And I think if there's anything new about the film, as much as it is ostensibly a prestige of all genres, it is that it has, sort of two minds and emotions at the same time. It's very much a cerebral experience, I suppose, but the film also shouts at you, and it constantly, it certainly leaves you with an emotion, and I suppose, and I hope it lingers on people's minds after they've seen it.
It absolutely did for me. Adding on to the comedic side of the film premiered at Venice, one of the big 5 film festivals. But in the movie itself, the film premieres in Rome. Did you apply to the Rome Film Festival, and would you have been accepted? And did you ever think about canceling Venice for making the meta joke a reality?
Well, obviously Venice is still far more important than the Rome Festival. I'm nothing against Rome, obviously. Obviously that was written before certainly I thought about where the film was going. I had a certain history with Venice because my first film was already shown there in the Critics Week. That was my graduation feature, and this time around, my first properly produced German film for cinema. It had the very big honor to be invited to a Venice competition, and of course people chuckled when they saw that scene in the cinema. Not because they think Rome is a shitty festival, but because the film takes a hard look at itself in that moment, and it gives you a certain happy ending that the film doesn't, that the film kind of withholds from you quite violently otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And it even somewhat goes further than the film that it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a very heavily inspired movie. Could you name a few titles that people might want to check out to understand more of the references?
It's a very unknown German film called Three Men in the Snow, Drei Männer im Schnee. I have to start with German cinema because it's kind of irreducibly in there. Obviously, if you have black and white mountains, you are dealing with Louis Trenker, Le Riefenstahl. epoch of mountain films. You're also dealing with I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the concept of the Heimat film, but those are kind of trivial, naive, post-war German films, usually comedies, which deal with some kind of, I would say, psychology of repression. They're usually about, young couples falling in love. There's some sort of switcheroo comedy going on. I don't know. But the mountains are a sort of backdrop to that. There are Edgar Wallace crime films that were also made in Germany in black and white, which are certainly in here. And the most obvious reference, I said it before, is Hitchcock, obviously. He's not the only one who made film noirs and crime films and, I guess, conspiracy films, but he's the most popular and most surviving of these filmmakers. So he was kind of our go-to reference in a lot of ways. Most of all, the music, I suppose.
Going back to some of the thematics, as someone growing up in Austria, I was always somewhat aware of the underground tank facilities Hitler tried to carve into the mountains. Now, were the tunnel systems in your movie somewhat related or referenced to that?
The film is taking place in Switzerland, and they have their very own tunnel system, which belongs to the military. It's called the Redouille. I cannot say from the top of my head now when they started boring into the mountain, basically. But I very much like the idea that this whole small country is kind of built like an underground fortress, and there's weird tunnels there. In the film, we learn that they actually mined uranium ore there. And the actual tunnel scenes, but they were shot in Germany, in Thuringia, in a very old iron mine, which also actually in the Second World War used to be a kind of, well, they built airplanes there, actually, and they tried to make Stasi bunkers out of it after the Second World War, but that never really materialized. And now it's a place where people go BMX biking, and nothing much happens. It's a huge place. It's very eerie going there, and you can get lost very easily. But that's, I think, certainly helped the film, because the film is shot mostly on location, even though we do a lot of puzzle, assembling the puzzle pieces together. The film is set in Switzerland, but mostly it's shot in Austria. The mountains are not the same, obviously, but I guess it works in a kind of Carol Reed way. That's another reference there, Night Train to Munich, in the way the landscape is treated and in the way there's a certain transition styles and acting styles and everything. Yeah, that was a very wild answer. So my mind is blanking.
Oh, good. I have seen this movie once now, which clearly wasn't enough for a somewhat Lynchian film like this one. Now, in the spirit of Lynch's infamous list of clues to untangle Mulholland Drive, I wanted to ask you for some clues that one should particularly pay attention to on a rewatch.
Oh, well, I guess the most important clue is the one you don't necessarily understand, but you understand it's important on the first viewing. It's the kind of core scene of the film where Karin, our female lead, witnesses Johannes having a nightmare, and he wakes up, and then she proceeds to tell him what she thinks the dream was about. And it turns out that she's right, but only mostly right, and there's a significant detail in which she's wrong. And it's that moment that she realizes, I think, that he is not the man she thought he was. And that's why she eludes him afterwards. I don't want to spoil the film, obviously. There's a clear reason why things happen. It's not, just dream images assembled in a random way. There's doppelgangers. There's people we thought were dead, but who then are alive. I can say those are not walking corpses, but they are real doppelgangers. And they appear. There are certain clues to these doppelgangers, especially to Bloomberg. He's one of the German physicists who was found dead. And later on, we see him again. But we see him in all kinds of places. For example, he wears a certain ring that appears in the film sometimes. And he actually there's a scene early on in the film where you can see two Bloombergs in the same train boxcar. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, Bloomberg is sitting down and talking to Johannes and Straten, the other German physicist, and another man is watching them from the shadows, and that is Bloomberg himself. That is certainly one clue you can look out for.
That's amazing. Thank you very much.
Another quick reminder that you can find the main episode and the link to the giveaway in the description. I'm George, and this was a bonus episode of Medicinema, your healthy dose of film.